The desert night had settled in with its bitter chill, the kind that seeps into the bones no matter how tightly one wraps their coat. And the campfire's glow was the only warmth breaking through the vast darkness, its flames licking at the dry wood with a crackle that echoed in the silence. It was around that fire that he sat, many miles of dust and too many nights of solitude. And across from him stood the woman who had wandered into his world as if fate itself had carried her on the wind, her clothes torn from travel, her hair loose and tangled, her face carrying both weariness and quiet defiance. And though she had not spoken much since he'd found her near the old trading trail, the way she clutched her arms around herself told more of her story than words ever could. For she was cold, hungry, and alone. He studied her for a long while, his calloused hands resting on his knees as if deciding what kind of man he'd be tonight, whether the hardened drifter who turned strangers away or the rare man of mercy who opened his fire to someone in need. And at last he broke the silence, saying, "You can share my fire, my food, or my bed." And for a heartbeat the air stilled, as if the stars themselves leaned in to hear her answer. And she looked up at him, those dark eyes reflecting the firelight, a soft smile curving her lips despite the hardship etched into her features. And she whispered, "I'll take all three." His chest tightened at the words, but with the quiet bravery of a woman who had already lost too much to pretend she could survive another night alone. And so he nodded once, wordless, and passed her the tin plate of beans he'd been heating over the flames. She took it carefully, her hands trembling slightly, and the way she savored each bite made him realize just how long it had been since she'd last known the comfort of a meal. And as she ate he watched, not with judgment, but with a strange sense of protectiveness, as if some unspoken thread had been woven between them from the moment she stepped into the glow of his campfire. The horses shifted nearby, their breath rising in white plumes against the night air, and the cowboy reached for his canteen, offering it to her without a word, and again she accepted, her throat working as she drank, her eyes flickering to him with something that hovered between gratitude and trust. When she handed it back, he leaned back against his saddle, stretching his legs toward the fire, and said quietly, "Not many folks come this way unless they're running from something." And though it was not a question, she answered all the same, her voice hushed but steady. "Sometimes running is the only way to live." He didn't push further, didn't ask who or what had driven her into the desert, for he knew the weight of secrets and the need to keep them locked away until one was ready. But he offered instead the silence of companionship, the kind that said he would not pry but would stand close, enough if the darkness tried to swallow her. The night deepened, coyotes howled in the distance, and the woman pulled her coat tighter around herself. But still the cold gnawed at her, and he saw it the way her shoulders shook, the way her lips pressed tight to keep from showing weakness. And he stood, then lowering himself beside her, his presence a wall against the night. And in that simple act she felt safer than she had in months. Hours passed like that, quiet and steady, until her head began to dip with exhaustion, her body unable to fight the pull of rest. And he noticed, saying gently, "Bedroll's yours if you want it." And though she glanced at him warily, he added, with a faint curve of humor in his lips, "I'll take the ground done it most of my life." But she shook her head, her smile small but certain, and reminded him of his own words earlier. "You said I could share your fire, your food, or your bed." "I meant it when I chose all three." For a moment he studied her, the firelight casting shadows across his rugged features, laying it down on the patch of earth he'd cleared near the flames. And when she settled beside him, their shoulders brushing, he felt the kind of stillness he hadn't known in years, a stillness that spoke of something beyond chance, something that whispered of destiny under the stars. She curled close, not with fear, but with trust, and he draped an arm lightly over her, not to claim, but to shield. And together they listened to the fire crackle and the desert night hum, their breaths falling into rhythm until sleep carried them away. For the first, he dreamed of her, the woman who had smiled softly at his offer and chosen all three, as if she'd known all along that sometimes what one needs most is not just warmth or food or a place to rest, but a soul willing to share it all. And dear viewers, if this story touched your heart, if you felt the fire, the hunger, and the quiet bond that sparked between them under the vast western sky, then make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because more powerful tales of love, survival, and fate are coming your way. Stories that remind us that even in the loneliest places, someone may be waiting to share the fire, the food, and the bed. If only we're brave enough to choose all three. Morning broke gently across the horizon, the pale light spilling over the desert plains, as if hesitant to disturb the peace that had fallen during the night. And the first thing she felt when she stirred was the steady warmth of his arms still draped protectively over her, a comfort she hadn't known in longer than she cared to remember. And when she turned her face slightly, she saw him already awake, eyes open beneath the brim of his hat, watching the sunrise with the kind of quiet reverence only a man who lived by the land could carry. And though he noticed her stirring, he didn't move away, only tipped his hat back and said in that gravelly, easy voice, "Sleep well." She gave a small nod, her lips curving in the faintest smile, and replied, "Better than I have in months." And he took that answer without pressing, though something in his chest tightened at the thought of what her nights must have been like before this one. Slowly, they rose, brushing the dust from their clothes, and he stoked the fire back to life with a practiced hand, heating the last of the coffee grounds in a blackened pot, while she knelt beside him to fold the blanket they had shared, careful in her movements, almost reverent, as if she knew that what they had begun under the stars was something fragile, something worth guarding. When he handed her a tin cup of bitter coffee, she sipped it slowly, grimacing at the taste but holding it close for the warmth. And he caught the expression, chuckling low in his throat, saying, "Ain't the kind you'd find in a city cafe, but it'll keep you upright in the saddle." And for the first time she laughed, a soft sound that seemed to surprise even her, and it filled the empty stretch of land with something brighter than the sun itself. They broke camp quickly after that, his movements efficient, her eyes learning from him. And when he saddled his horse, he motioned for her to climb up, saying, "Trail's long, and your boots won't last more than a mile in this dust." And though pride flickered across her face, she didn't argue, his arm steady around her waist as they set out across the barren land. The rhythm of the horse carried them, the silence between them not empty, but filled with the unspoken questions that hovered like ghosts in the air. Who she was, what she was fleeing, where she would go if not here. And at last, when the sun had risen high and the land stretched endless around them, she broke it, her voice low but sure. "Do you always ride alone?" He hesitated, the reins loose in his hand, before answering. "Always figured it was easier that way, less to lose, less to bury." And his tone carried a weight that made her chest ache, for she understood loss better than most, and she whispered back, "Easier doesn't always mean better." They rode until the afternoon heat pressed heavy, stopping by a dry creek bed where he let the horse drink what little water pooled there. And together they sat beneath the shade of a twisted mesquite tree, sharing jerky and bread from his saddlebag. As they ate, she told him pieces of her story, not all at once but in fragments, that painted a picture of a woman who had been forced from everything familiar, who had run from men with hard eyes and harder fists, who had walked miles until her feet blistered just to find herself standing in the glow of his campfire that fateful night. And he listened without interruption, his jaw tightening with each detail, his hand curling into a fist at his knee, until at last she finished with, "I didn't mean to bring my troubles to your fire." And he leaned forward, his voice firm, steady as steel, saying, "Ain't your troubles any more not if you don't want them to be." And the conviction in his words was like a vow, stronger than any promise she had ever heard. The rest of the day carried them further west, the horizon always shifting. And though the land remained harsh, the weight on her heart felt lighter, and with every glance she stole at the man riding beside her, she realized the fire, the food, and the bed he had offered were more than survival. They were the beginning of something she had long thought she would never deserve: a place, a person, a chance. As dusk fell, they found another patch of earth to rest upon, another fire built with his steady hands. And once more they shared the quiet intimacy of a meal beneath the stars. But this time when he spread the blanket wide, for she leaned into him with a trust that spoke louder than words, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close, whispering against her hair, "You chose all three, darlin': fire, food, and bed, but what I didn't tell you is I'd give you more if you asked. And she tilted her face up to his, smiling softly once again, the same smile that had changed everything the night before, and said, I don't need more, just don't take away what I already have. And in that moment he knew he couldn't, because somewhere between the dust and the firelight, between the silence and the laughter, she had become the piece of his soul he never realized was missing. They lay side by side, to wanderers no longer lost, bound not by chance but by choice, by the fire they shared, the food that kept them alive, and the bed that drew them close enough to discover that sometimes, in the wild loneliness of the West, if you felt the ache of their journey and the promise of what's still to come, then don't forget to subscribe right now, because more chapters of passion, survival, and fate are on their way, stories that burn with the reminder that love often begins with a choice as simple and as life-changing as saying yes to all three.